What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel, and we have reached the halfway point here of the UFL season. We've also reached the end of the semester for me, which means college football content going to be coming a little more often than it has in the past. Again, I apologize for that, but the UFL content is still here as promised every single week. On Friday, I upload a video. Again, this one coming out pretty late at night, but hopefully you guys can still watch it before the games kick off tomorrow. It's my Week 6 power rankings and predictions. With it being halfway through the UFL season, there is already quite a bit of teams that have surprised and a lot of teams that, okay, we're starting to really figure out who the contenders are to get into the playoffs, right? So when we take a look at this at Week 6, a lot of some not so great matchups. There are some pretty intriguing matchups this week, though, as well. So we're really going to dive on into everything this week. And in terms of who's going to start making that playoff push versus, okay, someone started hot and now they're getting cold. Someone started cold and now they're getting hot. Things like that. Week 6 usually a pretty important week here. At least I see it that way in the UFL season. Before we move on, though, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and continue to watch my videos. All those ways and more are ways you can help support the channel, especially by watching these videos. And you guys do a lot already. Predictions are going to start in just about a month. College football predictions will start in a month again. All 135 teams, I do believe it is now. No, I believe it's all 134. All 134 teams will have a video up on my channel from June to August, a week before the college football season. Make sure you tune into predictions. You don't want to miss them. So without further ado, power rankings and predictions. Let's go ahead and go through them. Starting out with my power rankings as per usual. And, well, this one is pretty easy, right? Not a lot of time needs to be spent on the Birmingham Stallions, although I will say a couple of things. Let's talk about the quarterback situation here first, and then we will talk about the first thing that you see there on my little notes thing, right? So Adrian Martinez has really sort of started to take control of this quarterback room. In fact, I'll talk about it later in the video when I preview games. He's going to end up making the second straight start for Birmingham this week. It's the first time that Skip Holtz has led a quarterback to back-to-back starts this season. Adrian Martinez is the guy that got to nod. Maybe he's the guy that starts to pull away in this quarterback battle. But other than that, I mean, you have a phenomenal group of skill position players. You have, my apologies, a phenomenal defensive group. However, there is one thing with this defense that I would like to see. They had 15 sacks through the first 3 games. And over the past 2 weeks, I think they've gotten 1, 2, maybe 3. The pass rush needs to start coming alive. You have St. Louis coming up here in 2 weeks. You have to go on the road to play San Antonio, second to last week of the season. And especially once it comes playoff time, you are going to want that pass rush to come to life. There we go. This is the team, though, that can absolutely do it. I mean, everything about this team is phenomenal. I love that Adrian Martinez is starting to take over that quarterback position. Person and Maribel are a great 1-2. Kane, Rogers, Williams, Sternberger, and Benjamin Victor are a great wide receiver room. This is a team loaded with defensive talent. I don't worry about the Stallions at all. They go on the road to play Memphis this week. That's a team that looks really flat. We'll talk about them later in this video. But again, I don't need to talk a lot about why Birmingham sits where they sit. Really good that Adrian Martinez is starting to pull away. I do want to see this pass rush start to come back to life here for the Birmingham Stallions. Hasn't been as good here the past couple of weeks. Would like to see that perk up a little bit better. 2, again, stays the St. Louis Battlehawks. A.J. McCarron has still been on an absolute heater, and the defense is really starting to step up. Guys like Willie Harvey and having Mike Rose back is huge. He's had 2 passes defended. Both of them have gone for picks, 19 tackles. He was a huge, huge, huge force, a former Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year coming back now for St. Louis. The defense is starting to get healthier, and these pieces are starting to come back on defense, and that is working out really, really well for St. Louis. I mean, Taumopenu, 4 sacks on the year. Travis Feeney has 3. There's a lot of really, really good players in the secondary as well. You see 4 names on the board, or I should say on the slide there, and I could have listed a whole lot more. It's a phenomenal group of wide receivers led by Hakeem Butler, who's really emerged. Ja'Cour Pearson is still a phenomenal weapon. We know what he can do. He's come back, and this is only through 2 games, people. 13 catches, 113 yards, and a touchdown. Ja'Cour Pearson is a phenomenal weapon. You have Aitman, you have Shepard, Sailors, and Durant. I know Mateo Durant is hurt right now. You have Wayne Gallman in the backfield there, but this is a phenomenal offense, and the defense is really starting to play with expectation here, or not with expectation, but the defense is really starting to play well. A fourth quarter explosion is what led them to the by far biggest win of the UFL season so far, and it is what really is. It's what really is defining this team. This offense and their willingness to explode, and they can do it at any given moment. It's what makes St. Louis so tough to defend. Not only that, but they do have the best home field advantage, at least in my opinion, in the UFL. This is going to be an absolutely phenomenal team to watch down the stretch. Again, you got that game against Birmingham still coming up. Very important game for St. Louis on May 11th. That is just going to be a fun one to watch. Couple other tricky, interesting games coming up for St. Louis, but as of right now, I mean, hey, the defense starting to step up. That's the big story for St. Louis moving forward. Let's talk about the San Antonio Brahmas. Much like the St. Louis Battlehawks, they also sit at 4-1, and this team is hot at times. And I do want to talk about that here because San Antonio, look, the first couple of games that they won, that game against DC and that game against Memphis, they had to win in some unconventional ways. Now, albeit they did hold DC to some very limited production in the red zone, which is a very good sign of this San Antonio defense. However, you also have to take a look at what they did against Memphis and the fact that probably a game they should have lost, probably a game that Memphis should have won. And if that was the case, I mean, San Antonio, if the schedule plays out how it has from then on, sitting at 3-2 and maybe not feeling quite as good about themselves, who knows? Maybe you go drop that game to Michigan, maybe Arlington, something like that. Speaking of the game against Arlington, I believe this game was tied 15-15 at the end of the third quarter, and they were able to win the game. Scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. They shut down Luis Perez and Arlington's offense. San Antonio looks really, really good right now. They've gone away from the unconventional style of thinking and are starting to play some really, really good football. Now, they have had to change their game plan because of Quentin Dormady. Again, Chase Garbers was that quarterback. Now it's Quentin Dormady here, and they're two very similar styles of play. They're two very different, I should say, styles of play is what I meant to say. Dormady is very much, hey, I want to throw the ball downfield, and it's cost him. He threw 3 picks. Now, albeit I do believe all 3 of them were in that first half, so he really cleaned up and played well down the stretch and helped San Antonio pull that game out against Arlington. But 3 picks is still not a great stat line. Only 1 touchdown in that previous game, so 2 touchdowns to 4 picks. That's a 1-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio. You definitely want that to get better, especially with a guy like Garbers being out. Now, Garbers has played well, but he is not like Quentin Dormady. In fact, I think their passing totals almost equal each other. That's because Garbers loves his checkdowns and Dormady loves his deep routes, right? So adapting to this new style of play, do you have the weapons to do it? Absolutely. Jontre Kirkland is outstanding. Marquez Stevenson is probably going to need to see a little bit of an uptick in production, but he's been phenomenal. Cody Latimer has been outstanding, one of the best tight ends in the league so far this year. Once you get Anthony McFarland back and maybe some weapons on defense starting to play a little bit better, San Antonio is a very, very scary team and also if Dormady can fix those interception issues. Other than that, I really like San Antonio. They got still sitting here at number 3. There has been a slight change in my power rankings. I have switched 4 and 5, which if you remember from last week, went DC and then Michigan. Well, it has been flipped. Oh, sorry. My apologies. There is one thing I do want to point out with San Antonio here. Still the most penalized team in the league. So as well as interception issues, you got to get those penalties and that discipline figured out as well. Okay, now we will move on to my switch. Again, DC was 4 last week. Michigan was 5. I flipped them. So we'll talk about the Michigan Panthers first, who are sitting here at number 4, a 35-18 win over Memphis in their previous game. Hills and Colburn. Finally. Wes Hills is getting the carries that he deserves. 3 touchdowns last game for Wes Hills. Are you kidding me? He had not had a touchdown rush all season long, had 3 in their last game against Memphis. Now, albeit the Showboats did turn the football over a lot, and again, the Showboats are just not a team that's playing good football right now, but Wes Hills, oh man, I was so happy to see him finally get those carries and get those opportunities. He's shown that he's one of the best, if not the best, running backs in this league, and Matthew Colburn is a great second option there as well. He's been playing really well for the Panthers this season so far. Danny Etling has taken over for E.J. Perry, and in my opinion, he's been pretty solid. He's been efficient with the football, 25 of 37. That's a pretty nice completion percentage right there, 280 yards. Again, there is no quarterback on this Michigan team that's going to be a big play threat, but Danny Etling has shown that he can use his legs too. And so as long as he can remain efficient and do what he needs to do at quarterback, this is the Michigan team that has a lot of good weapons. Again, Marcus Sims is that biggest one there. And you have a lot of other guys that are stepping up and playing well as well. Mariner really stepped up last week. I believe was the team's leading receiver. Might be getting that wrong, but I believe was the team's leading receiver last week. You take a look at some guys on this defense. Kai Nakua is the guy that I really want to talk about today. He has stood out, and he has played absolutely fantastic. 6 passes defended, 3 picks as that free safety. He's been outstanding for the Michigan Panthers this year, and if he continues to play at the level he does, it's a defense that already has been really, really scrappy and is proving to be one of the better defenses in this league. Torrendon and Ballard, my apologies for mispronouncing that last name, have been a great safety duo. There are a lot of great guys in this secondary. The defensive front, led by Wise Speaks, especially in the linebacking core, their leading tackler, and Frank Ginda. All of them really, really good. Now, you still have that date with Birmingham on the schedule, the second date with Birmingham on the schedule, I should say, and some pretty interesting games coming down the stretch here, including this one against Arlington. And I'll talk about why you don't count out the Renegades towards the end of my power rankings because they haven't won a game yet. But I want to talk about the pass offense and pass defense because that is where this team is lacking, right? We saw what Wes Hills and Matt Colburn could do last week. They are phenomenal on the ground. However, like I said earlier, this team doesn't really have a quarterback that's going to beat you with the long ball. They have a long ball threat in Marcus Sims. I don't really think they have a quarterback that can consistently utilize Marcus Sims to help beat opposing defenses. So you got to be able to get that passing offense going, and the passing defense has to be a little bit better as well. I believe they're in the bottom half of that category as well. Now, Kai Nakua, Tornadin, Ballard, all of those guys are playing really well. You have to limit those big plays and limit what the opposing team's passing offense can do. That's going to be really, really key this upcoming week when you face the quarterback that has the most passing yards in the UFL so far this season in Luis Perez. We'll preview that game when we get there. Let's move on to talk about the DC Defenders at 5. Again, it's a 4-5 swap from last week, and second straight week to where I just haven't really been impressed with what Jordan Ta'amu has really put on the field. We know he's a good quarterback. In fact, you could argue why he probably is one of the better quarterbacks in this league, but he's starting to really lose his touchdown numbers. His interception numbers are climbing. He's not utilizing his legs to the best of his ability, at least when he wants to. It just seems like there's no identity right now with this DC team. They're not super spectacular anything offensively. They're not super spectacular anything defensively. And the defense just had a collapse against St. Louis last week. They were in this game. It was 20-12 after 3 until the defense gave up 25 points against the Battlehawks in that final quarter. It is the first ever home loss for the DC Defenders in their existence in terms of recent history. I do believe that is correct, but the offense has no rhythm. The defense can't stop anything. That was evident by allowing the most points any team has allowed in the UFL so far this season with 45, albeit the offense is turning the football over, and yes, it's a DC team that has to start finding their identity. Abram Smith was a big part of that. You have to adapt without him. You're halfway through this season. You're supposed to be one of the better teams in this league, and I still think talent-wise they can be, and they can show that. They've kind of moved to Zaquandre White as that second running back behind Cam Harris, but this has got to be a team that's got to start turning stuff around. You had 3 straight home games. You lose a absolutely devastatingly massive blowout to St. Louis. You have San Antonio, you have Michigan coming in here. Getting to 4-3 is imperative for DC. If you fall to 2-4, that's going to make things really, really difficult here, especially when considering you still have to play that second game against St. Louis. It's going to be a really interesting finish for DC, but winning this week is imperative for DC, in my opinion, and it's about finding that identity, right? When can you find it, and what is it going to be? I can't wait to find out when watching the DC Defenders moving on down the line. When we talk about number 6 here, it's the Houston Roughnecks. They're 1-4. Again, took a loss to Birmingham. Hey, you can't really sweat that. Birmingham is the best team in the league. We all know that. Just simply no match for the Birmingham Stallions. Although the offense is really starting to heat up. I talked about it in the first couple of weeks to where I just didn't really feel like Houston had an offensive rhythm. Now, part of that being the fact that I think they don't have a necessarily great quarterback room, at least when you compare it to the other quarterback rooms in this league. However, Reed Sinnett is really starting to step it up and play very, very well. He's got 812 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's starting to play very well, starting to find his guys like Hall and Chisholm. And I realize that Kike Chisholm's name is on there twice, so give me 1 second. There we go. We got to give Emmanuel Butler the love that he deserves because he also has been playing well. Hall, Chisholm, Butler, they've all been playing well in this defense. It's really starting to lack, right? It played really, really well for a lot of the beginning of the season, especially stepping up in that game against Arlington, albeit it's hard to look good when you play a team like Birmingham on paper. I still thought this defense played pretty well. I still think they're one of the better defensive units in this league, but they're starting to get a little bit injured, and guys are starting to play through some injury, especially a guy like Reuben Foster, who threw I'll probably say the first 2, if not 3 weeks, looked like the best defender in the UFL. And over the past 2 weeks, his production just really hasn't shown that. He hasn't been the Reuben Foster that the first quarter of this season saw. If he can get back to playing the way that he did in those first few games, Houston has a chance to get hot. I truly believe they do. Now, running into Birmingham is just a very, very tough ask. And honestly, it's a very rough schedule for this team. You have to play what a lot of people think are the top 4 teams in the league in your next 4 games. Yikes. It's going to be a little hard for this Houston team to get hot late. The offense is heating up, and I do believe that Reed Sinnett providing some good life to this offense. Mark Thompson, he's just going to keep getting more and more and more carries as you move on, and the defense is too talented to necessarily not play up to expectations for the rest of this season. Really tough one on the road here against St. Louis coming up. I'll be previewing that game here in a little bit. But what you need to know about Houston, the offense is starting to get hot, and Reed Sinnett is starting to cook. He is really starting to be able to find his guys. Pledger and Thompson have been a great 1-2 punch, especially having Mark Thompson back. That has been awesome. If the defense can step it up and start playing like they have throughout the first couple of games, at least on paper, especially in that game against Arlington, Houston is going to be just fine. Again, the stats don't look great on paper, but they are really, really, really talented. So we'll see what happens with Houston down the line. Let's go ahead and move on here to number 7. Again, another little flippy flop. I had Memphis at 8 and Arlington at 7. I have flipped them, so now Memphis is at 7. I still don't think this team is playing great. In fact, turnovers led to their downfall. I believe there were 4 or 5 turnovers in that game against Michigan. And remember how I said last week that it just seemed like everything was bad with Memphis, right? No momentum, no courage, no heart, no guts. And the stats weren't really good either, except for a few couple things. Their rush defense really was pretty good coming into last week, and there were a couple other little things here and there that Memphis did really, really well. Well, the good got bad. The rush defense couldn't stop anything at all. Colburn and Hills were able to do whatever they wanted. This team offensively, who had been one of the better teams at holding on to the football. Troy Williams coming in, Case Cook is battling an injury off a hit that he took, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. He did not play great at all. Now, yes, he had some pretty good throws, but I believe 2 picks this past week. Youch, that is going to hurt immensely. Troy Williams is just a guy that has got to step up and play, especially if Case Cookis is going to be out. Now, I do believe that Case Cookis is coming back, and that's going to make a huge difference in this offense, but this run game also couldn't get going either. I mean, Darius Victor, we've really seen him ramp up his production as the season has gone along. He could not do anything this past week, not anything at all. Now, David Davis was very good. He's passed Jonathan Adams for the lead receiver on this team. Sage Surratt has been one of the best tight ends in the league this year. We know what Vinny Popel can do. And it's a defense that, again, look, like I said earlier, is just starting to get battered and beat up and bruised, right? There are a lot of guys that are starting to not necessarily play very well. Some guys that are battling injuries here, right? And some guys that, much like John Atkins and Max Roberts, have shown a lot of flashes this year. And look, they are very effective players. That's why they are on this board. But they're guys that you can't consistently rely on. At least they haven't shown it yet this year. Max Roberts had one really, really good game. I believe it was the game against Birmingham, if I am not mistaken. although I can't quite remember which game it was, but he had everyone on this defense has really shown flashes. You go up against a very tough Birmingham team, albeit at home, that smoked you the first time that they met. It was not close, and Memphis was coming off that absolutely crushing defeat against San Antonio. We'll see if they can turn it around, but they are in grave, grave, grave danger of losing 5 straight, are the Memphis Showboats. And there is one team that is still without a win in the UFL season, and it's the Arlington Renegades. I got to tell you, faith in this team is just lost. The past couple of weeks, I feel like, have been prime positions for Arlington to get back on track. That home game against DC. Okay, you were only 0-2, still playing well. You can figure some things out. On the road against Houston. At the time, the only other winless team in the league. A perfect opportunity. Well, Mark Thompson comes back. Arlington's offense doesn't play as well, and they lose that game to Houston. This past game against San Antonio, it was a very tight, very close game until the Arlington defense lost it in the fourth quarter, giving up 10 San Antonio points. What needs to change for the Arlington Renegades? Well, the offense is starting to play well. I mean, Luis Perez has 1,150 yards. He's the leading passer in all of the UFL, and as long as he is playing at the level that he is playing, maybe you'd like to see him play a little bit better at times, but as long as he's playing at the level that he has shown us he can play at, Arlington is going to be in pretty much every single game that they play. They have a phenomenal group of wide receivers with Peyton, Vaughns, Burnett. We know what Sal Cannella can do at the tight end position, but this defense has not been good. Their offense ranks tops, at least in the top half of the league, in a lot of categories. The defense ranks at or near the bottom in pretty much everything. Now, there is, again, as I've said throughout this video, still some great upside to this team. The offense does play very, very well, and Luis Perez might very well, you could argue, be the best quarterback in this league. But the defense needs to step up. Vic Beasley is a guy that you need to see getting more production. We've seen guys like Redmond and Payne and Lee get into the backfield. That's the big thing here, right? Get into the backfield, create some havoc, let some of these defensive backs step up, and they got to start playing a little bit better here. Arlington was a team that was led by their defense last year. It helped them go win a UFL title along with Luis Perez. The defense is really letting Arlington down. Now, albeit this was a team that went 4-6 last year, squeaked into the playoff field, and somehow, or not somehow, I know exactly how they did it. The defense stepped up. Luis Perez played well, but they won an XFL championship last year. They still know that they can play to that caliber. You have a couple games coming up here against Michigan and Memphis in which you can do exactly that. Build some momentum before that back stretch of games, but you probably have to win all 5 of your games here to at least have a chance to get into the playoffs with the way that San Antonio and St. Louis are playing right now. You have to beat at least one of those teams out, and it is not looking good for Arlington at all. They got to get hot really, really fast, and it starts with that defense stepping up and Luis Perez continuing to play at the level that he has shown he can play at all season. So there are my power rankings here again. A little bit of faith lost in the Arlington Renegades. They just haven't shown that killer instinct that they had, especially late in the season last year. We'll see if they can end up finding it later in the back half of this season. But for right now, let's go into my game previews for next week. The first game up is, well, the first couple games that I have to preview here on Saturday are against teams that sit at the top of the power rankings versus teams that are at the bottom of the power rankings. So I won't really get too much into these games here, but this one's against the Birmingham Stallions and the Memphis Showboats. Now let's run through the things for Birmingham here really, really quickly. Martinez took control, or I should say is going to take control of this offense for the second straight game. I talked about that already, and Skip Holtz loves to utilize his 2-quarterback system. Martinez is probably that guy that's going to start taking control of this offense, so we'll see what he can do in his second straight start. I'm excited to see if Adrian Martinez will, yes, be that guy that ends up taking over this offense and taking to the reins for these Stallions. However, Cookus is going to challenge this secondary, right? Okay, there you go. I changed it so it made a little bit more sense here. But Cookus and company are going to challenge this secondary. This is the Birmingham secondary that, again, if you want to point out a weakness with this defense, the weakest point of this defense might very well be that secondary. Now, albeit that is getting really nitpicky, their secondary is still very, very good. I'm not saying it's not, but Cook is coming back here. He is in that starting role as the quarterback, is going to provide some new life for this Memphis Showboats team. 8 sacks and 211 yards. 8 sacks, 211 yards allowed. That's what Birmingham did in the last meeting against Memphis, which means, again, do that again. This is a perfect opportunity for this pass rush to start to wake back up, right? That's a thing I talked about with Birmingham. This pass rush needs to wake up, and if it can do that here, well, we know what they did in their past meeting against Memphis. It's on the screen right there. They can absolutely do it again against these Showboats. Case Cookis is going to provide some life, though, when he comes back. And again, this is a phenomenal group of pass-catching weapons. You have a lot of very, very good pass-catching weapons. If Darius Victor can pick up his game and the offensive line can protect Chase Cookis, it's going to be a team that is going to have a chance offensively to compete against Birmingham. Now, obviously, it's one thing to say that and expect it of them. It's another thing to actually go out and do it. So we'll see if Memphis can give Chase Cookis time to develop, because he is the key here in this game. Out-dueling Adrian Martinez and really just trying to get past this Birmingham defense however you can is going to be a challenge. But speaking of the pass rush, yes, it is a phenomenal opportunity for Birmingham to step up and for this pass rush to really get going again, considering what they did in their last meeting. The Showboat pass rush has to find some life of their own. They have to find some sort of a pass rush to A, keep Martinez guessing, keep him on his feet, have him get rid of the ball quickly, and B, create some chaos, create some havoc, force a turnover, and things like that. But I have a quote down here from Why Not Us. I believe it was TJ Neal or TJ Green. It was one of the two TJs on this Showboats team that when asked about playing the Birmingham Stallions, he said, look, this is a phenomenal opportunity for us to go get what we want, for us to build some momentum. Why not us? And why not them? You saw what the Stallions did in that first game there. They absolutely embarrassed you guys, and there is no understating that. Go for it. Play hard. Get this win. Get yourself back on track, and it would be a wonderful thing here for the Showboats to give the Stallions their first loss of the season. Sadly, I just don't see it happening. I mean, Birmingham is a 13.5-point favorite for a reason. All lines and odds as of recording this video, by the way. I mean, I really don't see the Stallions having much trouble with this one, especially the way they played Memphis in their previous game. Perfect opportunity for Birmingham to get that pass rush developed, and I think Martinez is going to start to take control of this quarterback position. I think he'll play well. Cookis will have his moments, but overall Birmingham is just too tough, they're too strong, and they will beat the Memphis Showboats on the road. This one is going to be at home for St. Louis. We have another double-digit favorite this week. The 11.5-point favorite Battlehawks will be taking on the Houston Roughnecks. Keys for the Roughnecks, because this does seem like a mismatch yet. Reed Sinnett has to outduel A.J. McCarron. Okay, maybe he doesn't have to outduel him. However, he does have to keep pace with him. We saw what the Battlehawk offense can do last week, and it's especially when it comes to that fourth quarter, they really showed that they can put up offense pretty much whenever they want. So as long as you can have that duel with A.J. McCarron and you can stay pace, and this is an offense that can keep up with what Houston has shown us this year, that might be a little bit tricky. But Reed Sinnett has the tools to do it. With Mark Thompson back here, if he gets going, that's going to just provide that balance that you need to be able to get through this Battlehawk defense. Speaking of defense, I talked about how the Houston defense has been really, really good statistically pretty much all season long, but there is one thing that is starting to lack, and that is the pass rush. They were so disruptive for the first 2 games, and they've really, really cooled off. Now, again, that is in part due to the fact that guys are injured and hurt and whatever, but the pass rush has to wake up. That is not an option here at all. If you can't get pressure to A.J. McCarron, he's going to beat you 7 ways from Sunday. There is no way that Houston is going to win this game if they don't sack A.J. McCarron, I'll say at least 2 or 3 times, or at least make him force some throws and get him to turn the football over. And speaking of the defense, too, the secondary faces its biggest task yet. This is the wide receiver core for St. Louis that is absolutely phenomenal. and very much so is the best wide receiver core in this league. And speaking of which, I mean, this wide receiver versus defensive back one-on-one battles will be outstanding. The secondary for Houston has proven to be very, very good so far this year. But again, its biggest task here with Butler and Shepard and Pearson. There are a ton of guys that can beat you one-on-one, and you never really know where the football is being thrown, especially if they have some of these slant routes, these vertical routes, these post routes. St. Louis is a very well-designed offense. They look like an oiled machine, and A.J. McCarron leading them at quarterback. I cannot wait to watch this wide receiver versus defensive back battle. I think that is going to be so much fun. For the Battlehawks, though, defensively, you can't give up those big plays. You just can't do it. It is imperative in the fact that you don't let Mark Thompson break free. You don't let Reed Sinnett and these wide receivers beat you over the top, because they are starting to find that momentum, right? This is the Houston offense that is starting to find it. Sinnett is putting some tools into this offense, and he is starting to play really well. Having Mark Thompson back gives you a true 1-2 punch, because Pledger has been playing well this season as well. You got to be able to step up there defensively, no man behind you, and no big plays. There have been moments where St. Louis has struggled with that this year, but defensive pieces are back, or they're playing better, especially having a guy like Mike Rose back. Again, I say it pretty much every time I say his name, but former Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year from the Iowa State Cyclones. This is an absolutely massive game here for Houston, at least to try to make close, right? But St. Louis, with the defensive pieces coming back, and with what I saw St. Louis's offense do last week, I don't know that Houston's offense can simply keep up. I believe that Houston's defense has the tools and has what it needs to be able to slow St. Louis down a couple of times here and be able to keep themselves in this game. The offense, I'm not too sure it can outduel A.J. McCarron and the Battlehawks. That's why I got St. Louis winning this one 37-16. Just an absolute offensive explosion. It's the hottest offense in the UFL right now, and they will be beating the Houston Roughnecks 37-16. That's what I got going for this game. All right, we'll move on into the games being played on Sunday. And this one is a pretty interesting one here. So the winless Arlington Renegades are going to be looking for their first win of the season, as the Michigan Panthers will host the Arlington Renegades, the XFL champs from last year. Michigan has been one of the surprise teams this year, and they face an Arlington team that is just struggling in every single conceivable way. You have to give Perez something to work with. He's probably, in a lot of cases, maybe besides A.J. McCarron, sure, the best quarterback in this league so far. He leads the league in passing yards, people. He needs some help. He has a phenomenal group of wide receivers. The run game has to give him some good support. They have good players offensively, but you have to be able to give Luis Perez some help. He's going to play well on a week in and week out basis. That is something that you can absolutely count on with the Arlington Renegades, is the fact that Luis Perez is going to play well. He needs help, and he needs guys to be able to step up, catch the football, run some good routes, run the football as well. The offensive line's got to do a better job of stepping up there as well. But slowing the run game, when you talk about defense here, slowing the run game is the absolute number one priority, because this is a run game that is going to start to get really hot really fast. And especially with talented players like Hills, who again might be the best running back in this league, and Matt Colburn, Michigan has got to be able, or I should say Arlington, has got to be able to slow down this run game. I believe it's the worst run defense in the league. That is priority number one. Again, this is a Michigan team that, even though, yes, Sims is a very good deep ball threat, they don't have a quarterback that can consistently beat you. Focus on the run game and slow it down. But you also do have to give pressure to Danny Etling as well. Meaning, what position grouping can both pressure Etling and slow the run game down? The defensive line. The defensive line has to be stout. It has to play really, really well, and Luis Perez will give this Arlington team a shot to go and win this game. What can the Michigan Panthers do, though? Well, I just said it a moment ago. You're going up against the worst run defense in the entire league. We saw the run defense, or the run offense, start to play really, really well last week, and this is a run game that can absolutely explode. Now, that all depends on, again, if Arlington is up to the task or not, but if they stay consistent with what they've shown so far this year, I mean, this is a Michigan Panther run game that is looking to absolutely break out, right? You have to be able to get the ball out of Perez's hands quickly. The Panthers' defensive front, well, they've proven to be one of the best defensive fronts in the league so far. They're scrappy. They force turnovers. They did it against Memphis this past week. Get the ball out of Luis Perez's hands as quickly as possible. Maybe you'll even force them to throw a pick or two that can help seal this game for the Panthers. I just think the Renegades defense has way too many holes. Sure, they have some great talent, but from what I've seen so far from them this year, the run defense is just not great. The secondary is too porous, and if Danny Etling can hit Sims or one of these other wide receivers for a 40-plus yard gain once or twice, I think that's going to be the end of the Arlington Renegades here. Luis Perez is going to keep this game close, so I see it being just another tough loss for the Arlington Renegades, but I got 23-20. Again, this Michigan run game I think is going to explode. I think that defensive front is just too good, and the Renegades will stay winless after week 6. And moving on to the final game here. Yep, it's the only two teams we haven't talked about yet. It's the Brahmas and the Defenders. Ooh, this one is going to be a good one. It was a fairly competitive game there in week 1, but I'll talk about the biggest key here in this game, and it comes on the side of the home team. Second out of 3 straight home games for the DC Defenders. They got embarrassed last week, especially in that fourth quarter. They're looking to rebound this week against the San Antonio Brahmas team that's starting to play really, really hot. But I talked about it earlier when I talked about San Antonio, right? Quentin Dormady's big playability has to be on display. He is a guy that loves to roll outside of the pocket and throw deep. Well, okay, he loves to stay poised in the pocket and throw deep. Garbers is the guy that loves to roll out of the pocket, hit his slants, hit his check down routes, and get some solid yardage. However, with Dormady's style of play, he takes more chances. He throws more 50-50 balls, which, yeah, of course, are going to lead to more picks. You have to avoid those interceptions here in this game, especially with what I'm about to talk about later with DC. But the skill position players have all the momentum in the world. Yes, there are guys that are a little bit banged and beaten up for San Antonio right now, but you have the leading pass catcher amongst tight ends in the league here with guys like Kirkland and Stevenson. Those guys are going to step up and play really well, and especially if Dormady's big playability is on full display, meaning he's hitting his wide receivers instead of throwing picks. That is going to be a huge thing for San Antonio in this game. Now, this is I talked about it again when I talked about San Antonio. They found unconventional ways to win. Does that rise back up here in the second and final game they will play against DC this year, unless, of course, they happen to meet in the playoffs? We'll see, right? It is definitely going to be a very fascinating thing to watch because it's a team that's starting to play really well conventionally. They may have to throw in some unconventionalism here in order to beat DC for the second time. But why does this defense have to step up for San Antonio, right? I didn't really talk about it, but it's a defense that has to step up. They're starting to play really well, but Jordan Ta'amu is going to be looking for a rebound performance, right? Ta'amu, to be quite honest with you, and this is no slight to Jordan Ta'amu, I love him as a quarterback. I think he's talent-wise one of the better quarterbacks in this league. He has not played well the past couple of weeks up to his standards. Perfect opportunity for him right here to rebound, have a great game, and for DC to really start finding their identity, because I don't necessarily think they have one yet, but create havoc, force chaos. This especially goes for the defensive front. When Dormady throws those 50-50 balls, which he will throw at least once, maybe twice, if not 3 times here in this game, win it. Win those 50-50 balls, whether that's knocking that pass down on a big third down play or picking that ball off and getting it to go the other direction. Create havoc, force chaos, get Dormady in some pressure, limit this run game, win the 50-50 balls, and DC's got a great shot to win this game. That is what we thought with DC in the first game of the season. However, red zone, red zone, red zone, red zone, red zone. I don't know how many times I can say red zone until it gets ingrained in DC's head, because you have to perform in the red zone in this game. Their red zone offense was atrocious the first time they played this team. San Antonio is going to, again, sort of have that similar style of bend but don't break defense. DC is going to get into the red zone many times here in this game. They have to be able to capitalize in this next meeting, and I think that they do. San Antonio is the 1.5-point favorite here, but I like DC to win a very, very close, very competitive game. DC is going to get to 3-3. This is one of those games that this coaching staff is going to have the defenders ready for. I know the Brahmas are playing really, really well right now, but this is a game that DC knows they cannot afford to lose. Otherwise, things become really hard to get into the playoffs. You end up only a game behind of San Antonio, and possibly killing their momentum while gaining some of your own will help DC make the playoffs over a team like San Antonio. A very pivotal game here in week 6 that I have the Defenders winning 24-23. And with all that, quick outro here. Thank you for watching my UFL coverage. College football content is coming your way as I am done with my junior year of college. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.